Okay, well, welcome everybody. We are going to just go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining today's early intervention echo. If you've not taken a minute to do that, if you'll put your name and contact information into the chat. As you notice when you joined, we are recording today's session. It will be on our Canvas page, our YouTube, and our website. We use that so that you can go back and review these sessions, as well as it's for educational purposes. Participation is a huge part of ECHO, so remember to reach out to people, ask those questions, give feedback and comments on it. If you are comfortable and able, please turn on your cameras. It gives all of us a face versus just a name on the screen. It helps us get to know each other a little bit more. So, but I know that it's right during lunchtime and we're all shoveling our food in our mouths, so that's okay too. Case narratives are a great way to learn information and kind of solidify our skills. So if you are interested and have a case that you want to share with us, please reach out to any of the hub members. We all have an asterisk in front of our name, and they'll be able to help you with those case presentations. When we're talking about anything, we do use some we talk about some serious stuff, as well as we just want to make sure that we are protecting individual privacy. So avoid any identifiable information. Once again, if you're unsure of what to talk about, go ahead and reach out to one of the hub members or myself and ask us. If you'll also take a minute and rename your profile, so participation helps us know who's on the call, to be able to call out on people, or to just even know if Shelby said something, I know to reach out to Shelby and find out further information. So take a minute to rename. Raise your hand feature, you can always do that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also just put it right into the chat. A certificate of attendance is mailed out or emailed out after the session and that a survey has been completed. Thank you to everybody who completed their surveys from our January session. I will put in the link for the surveys here in just a minute, and it will come out in the follow-up email. Canvas is the platform that we use to store any of our information, so the recordings, PowerPoints. We also store any of the case recommendations from all of the groups. So if you were in group number 1 and you want to see what anybody shared in group number 2, you can always go and find case recommendations on the Canvas page. If you have any questions, also utilizing the Canvas discussion board is just another way to communicate with other members in our group. So case studies, again, I just always want to make a plug for that because that is a great way to just learn from each other. It's a great way to share resources and other information. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. I'm really excited today for Pat to be talking to us about feeding and development, and I'm going to stop sharing and let her take that over.
It's there. Come on, go home. Oh gosh.
Oh no, we worked on this. Go to your slideshow.
And I'm just going to go to slideshow. Okay, slideshow.
There you go.
Play from start. Okay, is everybody ready? I'm going to put a timer on because I talk way too much. And now I got to find the dang timer. Timer. So my name is Pat Boyle, and I'm a pediatric physical therapist, and I have been around for a long time, and I'm very, very, very passionate about motor development, feeding development, development in general. So what I wanted to do for you guys today was to couch this with looking at all areas of development. Oh gosh, why won't it advance? My button has not been allowing me to advance.
If you go down to the left-hand corner, there are those arrow buttons.
I know it won't let me.
Oh, no.
Hear that? So I was having to physically advance it this morning. So what can I do here, guys? Can you, well,
I can certainly pull up your slides and show them if you want to do that, Pat.
yeah, I like to be in control, but oh, well, yeah.
I mean, Bailey, what other ideas do you have?
You could also just not have it in presentation mode.
I know,
And just
I know. So I think I'll escape.
that way you can still scroll. So everyone might get sneak peeks of things, but
It won't let me escape either. Oh, I get so tired of this nonsense. I don't know why it's doing this to me. It's a great photo, right?
It is. She's an adorable kid. And, we just all will say we've all been there, done this on Zoom. So know the frustration, Pat.
Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to do this way. Sorry. So my goals are that you will know the variability, and that's the most important thing. Just like in development, there's a variability in feeding patterns in our typical population. I want you to understand the relationship between all areas of development and feeding skill emergence. I want you to be able to mentor families on appropriate foods for their level of developmental skill. And then I want you to be able to recognize when you need to refer to a feeding specialist and or a dietitian. So my history is long. I graduated 46 years ago. I worked in a children's hospital, and most of my work was cardiopulmonary. I did a lot of banging on kids with cystic fibrosis and pneumonia and whatever. I sort of tumbled into becoming NDT certified, which became the foundation of my practice. And then I've added all this other subtle stuff, your craniosacral, myofascial, and infant massage. But then I've become very, very interested in feeding and nutrition. And then finally I've circled back, and I'm very interested in how kids breathe. So let's just start with these little buddies in utero. And so the platform for this is I'm going to go through gross motor, fine motor, hearing, vision, not so much cognitive, but they're all intertwined. And then look at feeding and feeding development and how it relates to all these other systems. So we are not gross motor. We are not fine motor. We're not feeding. We're everything. And that's what I hope the takeaway is. So they start swallowing very early. Some say as early as 12 weeks in utero. And this is really important because it helps to regulate the amniotic fluid. So by term, these little puppies are drinking anywhere between 200 and 450 mils, which is about half of the amniotic fluid in a day. And sucking has also been observed. There's multiple receptor sites for smell and taste, which starts to develop about 11 weeks gestation. And by 16 weeks, it's mature. And I used to hear people say, but the nasal plugs need to fall out of the nose before they can really smell and taste. But it's there. So these kids are gangbusters for joining the eating. And amniotic fluid has a lot of different tastes and smells, and this is what the baby prefers once they're born, is that which they were exposed to in utero. So your anatomy of the eye, we'll go through that really quickly. Vision's not ready to be stimulated until they're 40 weeks of gestation. And you can see why, because it's a very, very immature system. It's the last mature system in utero. Hearing, again, is very mature. The structural development of the ear begins obviously in the first 20 weeks, and the neurosensory, or the input, the conduction, definitely a baby is hearing what's going on outside by 23 to 25 weeks of gestation. Your vestibular, your proprioceptive, touch, and motor systems are totally supported by that liquid environment, and the baby feels everything. However, the biggest piece of this is they're not ready to be poked. They're not ready to feel burning touch or light touch. They're just ready to feel that proprioceptive, firm touch that they're getting in utero. And this is all supporting development. So by the time 40 weeks comes along, their muscle and bone development, their proprioceptive development is emerging and going forward. So what's eating? So Chrissy Brackett said, eating involves 31 muscles and 6 cranial nerves, more than your hip flexors, that's for sure, in order to bend your hip. It's a complex interrelationship between swallowing and breathing. It's a complex interrelationship between GI motility and hunger. And it's a complex interrelationship between your sensory system, emotion, and finally, it's social. It doesn't like to go out and eat. So what is the oral experience for a newborn? For the newborn, they come out and I go and see lots of little 24-hour-old babies. And man, they're a pretty intact, daunting little system. It's time for them to root, to use their rooting reflexes, to nutritively suck and swallow, or to use non-nutritive sucking to calm and organize. They're exposed, boom, you're born, you're exposed to odor, taste, touch, the movement of all aspects of receiving food. So mom picks up the baby and puts them close to her breast. That's the movement, that's the motor system saying, we're ready, let's eat. And then they eat, they swallow, and then it has to be digested through the GI system. So it's, I don't know, there's a bunch of new mums on here, I think. After about 12 weeks of expressing interest and hunger and receiving and ingesting and satiating, the infant is supported by a responsive caregiver and the feeding experience is established. So it could take 3 months before everybody figures out how to eat. But the bottom line is it takes a lot of time to establish competent feeding, both from the caregiver and the infant perspective. So what I want to do is go quickly through some of these principles of development, and they're so important because they don't just relate to fine motor and gross motor. They relate to hearing and vision and ultimately to eating. So we have movements that need to be dissociated. So you get your total movements of your newborn baby, and they're replaced by finer, more selective movements. And think about being supported in upright sitting to being able to get into and out of sitting. So you need that separation of activity. And the tongue movements are just the same. So compare sucking or suckling with chewing. I mean, it's a gradual, what we call separation of movement of the tongue, the jaw, and the oral structure in order to eat. Then you need to be able to stabilize. You need to be able to sit on your pelvis, sit on your bum in order to turn, right? You got to keep one part stable in order to make the other part move. And that's the same thing with drinking. During drinking, the jaw stabilizes and allows for the active movement of the tongue and lips. And this is a progression through development. You have grading, and grading means I'm looking at that marshmallow versus that soccer ball. What kind of motor movement output do I have to pick up that marshmallow versus picking up the soccer ball? Whole different set of muscle groups. And that's the same with the jaw. The jaw needs to stabilize in order to allow for more active movement of the tongue and lips. And that's a gradual development through time. Grading, and that's a gradual development through time. So how much jaw movement do you need to take a bite out of an apple? You know, you can't just, it's not like you're taking some puree and you open your mouth a little bit. You have to open your mouth, you have to bite, and then you have to grade down to know how much bite to use with your jaw. Development goes from the center out. You get head control before you get trunk control and jaw control. Development's a sensory motor act. It's not just a matter of everything getting stronger or maturation of the nervous system. It's experience. Practice, and feel again. So children do things because it feels good. They rock and 4-point before they crawl because it feels good. They put a cracker or a toy in their mouth. It feels good. And the music, when they hit a toy, it sounds good. So development is sequential again. Each act in development is based on previously acquired acts. So we don't stand a 3-month-old and expect them to walk. They have to go through all of the developmental muscle systems and joint systems in order to get there. And they're overlapping. So while the baby is mastering one skill, they're practicing another. So they're mastering sitting while they get at it sitting. So when we look at munching, which is being able to use your tongue to smash food up against your palate, it's built on being able to suck and being able to bite, phasic bite, not the bite, the mature bite. So a lot of this stuff is very complex. Principles. Okay, this is the one takeaway I want you all to have, is that development occurs in planes of movement. And that's not just your gross motor, it's your oral motor, it's your fine motor, it's your vision. All of those planes of movement have to be intact in order for you to continue your development. So the first one is the sagittal plane, which is just flexion and extension. So the baby's on their belly and they lift their head and they put their head down. So that's flexion and extension. The next movement is side to side movement. So they're on their belly and they're starting to shift side to side. Okay. And that's called the sagittal or the lateral or the side flexion, whatever you want to put. And then the final one, which is the joy of everything, it gets everything put together, is being able to rotate. So it's being able to, on your belly, being able to prone pivot. Okay. It's being able to sit, and you're sitting, you're going forwards and back, you're going side to side, and oh my goodness, I think I'll rotate over my trunk and get out of sitting. So those are the planes of movement, and we see them everywhere in development. And if that's the one takeaway, you can forget all the principles of development, but it's planes of movement that needs to be there. So let's look at birth to 3 months. And I am going to try and sort of sort it out into the developmental areas. Gross motor is the biggie. You've got emerging head control, and the rest of the body, which needs to occur mostly in prone. In supine, you've got some movements that need to happen, and our kids are in supine more than we as therapists like, but gross motor is emerging with head control. They're moving into and out of that physiologic flexion initially, where they're super, super tight as little newborns. And then they're moving, they're very tied up here. And then gradually they start to go away from their bodies to get more, and they look really weird and asymmetric before they come back again, which is more controlled flexion. Fine motor is the same. You have all of this positioning of the arm, and you have a very reflexive grasp, and the grasp is stronger on the outside of the hand than it is on the inside of the hand. Vision, it's the most under-challenged sensory system. It takes off. The baby's now orienting to light source. They're getting eye contact, they're tracking, they're following movements, they have a social smile, and they may just look at their hands. And hearing, again, they're quieting to voice when they hear it, and they may orient to voice. So all of this requires movement. It's not just a system in isolation. So where do we go with the oral motor? You've got your rooting, your gag, and your phasic bite in the newborn. And sucking is initiated by root and tactile experience at the breast or bottle. It's one plane of movement, and the movement of the tongue goes forward and back. So it's extension and retraction, or flexion and extension, however you want to couch it, with the tongue elevated against the palate. So this is the most interesting thing, that it's a good takeaway for our typical kiddos. Wolf and Glass, who are feeding specialists, call the mouth a potential cavity. The newborn mouth is a potential cavity because it's filled with the tongue. They have sucking pads on the side, which is these huge fat pieces in the cheeks.
I didn't get that.
Oh,
Have you
shush.
tried?
My watch doesn't like me. And what happens is the baby just needs to pull that breast nipple or bottle in, and it's stabilized on the top on the sides by the fat pads, and by this massive tongue that's pushing it up against the palate. And that's all the kid has to do is go back and forth. It totally supports that mouth, totally supports breastfeeding. It totally supports transfer of milk as it's needed out of the breast or bottle. So I wanted to show this video. So everybody bear with me. I have 15 minutes left. Okay. So I get into my Google Chrome and there we go. So this is an MRI of a baby at the breast breastfeeding.
So
And
Pat, we're not seeing the video quite
Oh,
yet.
so
I
is
think
that,
you have to stop share and then click on the window that you want to share again, and that should open up the one that you want to
it
show.
worked before. Okay, just a sec. So stop share. And then share again.
Share the
Yeah.
Make sure you share the sound too.
Oh, it's not up here. Well, maybe it is. Yep, there it is. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right, there is no sound. It's a baby quietly breastfeeding. So what you see is the milk being transferred, suck, immediately swallowed, breath, suck, swallow, breath, suck, swallow, breath. This is miraculous. We can hear all of this when we're listening with a stethoscope. We can see it. We can watch the diaphragm rise. But man, this shows you just how competent these little guys are. And if you count the respiratory rate of the mother, sorry, I got to go back here because it's only a few seconds. So if you count the respiratory rate of the mother, she's doing 1 breath for every 3 of the baby. But this is beauty. And this would not occur without those fat pads. It wouldn't occur without that tongue up against the palate. This is beautiful. And the child is eating functionally. Okay, so I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stop the share, right? And then go back in and share my screen. There we go. Okay, does everybody appreciate the beauty of this? That is beautiful. And it's what gets somebody like me super excited. So sorry, I'm so excited. But these are competent little people. All right, so we slide over into our 4-month. And our gross motor, this is a stage of mobility. Man, oh man, oh man. We've got that backward and forward plane going. We're trying to figure out our side to side weight shift, which is our lateral. And then, man, we just might experiment with a little bit of rotation in our trunk. So they become more symmetrical in all areas, in all positions. And as they head towards 5 months, they're doing some weight shifting. Does this help with the doll? Because I'm not a very good weight shifter. So they're doing more weight shifting. And they're getting a lot of feedback as they're doing this, as they reach and discover their toes, as they look in sitting to where everything is. Fine motor, they're doing a lot of mouthing of their fingers, they're fingering. They can hold on to an object if you place it. Their raking is emerging. And then it becomes accomplished depending on their skill set. They have a visual reach, grasp, and palmar grasps. So they're getting into that grasp away from that outside part of the hand into more of the palm of the hand. They can, with their vision, they can shift from one object to another. Their eyes are used together for visually directed play, and they can follow a rolling ball. I mean, they're really accomplished. With dissociation of the head in sitting, the infant can orient to your voice. They can look and see. They can look and then orient. So because of the trunk stability that's going on, they're able to access their other sensory systems. So oral motor, what are we doing? Okay, so that initial sucking response in the 0 to 3 month to 4 month baby is called a suckle. It's obligatory and it allows us to capture the baby, show them what it feels like to have a full tummy, and then feel what it's like to be hungry. So a lot of that's captured. But it's also a time as it goes away, the suckle is emerging because the fat pads are starting to go away. And again, we've got development. So you're seeing some feeding issues. You can see feeding issues emerging. At this stage, they're munching on toys and fingers, and you're seeing some lateral movement of the tongue being supported and strengthened. As a newborn, we have lateral reactions. Our tongue will follow a finger if we put it into their mouths, but that's a reflex. And then as they get more mature, it becomes a functional motor movement, which requires strength and endurance. So the sucking is more mature. You have volitional use of the tongue, lips, and jaw, and the movements are more up and down with negative pressure. So you not only have that forward and backward movement, you now have more up and down movements and more maturing of the tongue movement. If the baby is being fed puree at this time, they may revert back to that suckling pattern because they don't know how to transfer food other than from a breast or a bottle. So you get a lot of initial bolus loss, and with experience with the spoon, as they get older and older, you're going to see the lip come forward to clean off the spoon. And usually by about 6 months, that's when you're starting to see some actual munching going on in the mouth. But the mouth is closed when we are munching. Keep that in mind. If the mouth is closed, they're munching. 7 to 9 months. Okay, again, the trunk is free. It's done its weight-bearing activities. The respiratory system is taking over the lateral costal muscles. They're not so much using their diaphragm. They're using their trunks to breathe. They're using their trunks to stabilize in sitting. And so your pelvis and your lower extremities are taking over. And those planes of movements, those 3 planes of movements, there should be a test at the end of this about what are the planes of movements, everybody. Those 3 planes of movements are now complete because the child is crawling and they're moving into and out of sitting easily. Fine motor, you're progressing, so it's coming over to the thumb and forefinger. Index fingers, so they're getting a more of a radial palmar grasp. They're getting a radial digital grasp. The thumb is starting to oppose, and the biggest thing is you're seeing some active supination. So you're seeing that forearm turn, which allows them to play in sitting and hold on to objects with a neutral forearm. So again, you're getting those planes of movement again all over. Your visual skills are mature, they're paired with cognition and language, and they're tuck, tuck, tuck. So the speeches can tell me all the sounds that they're making. They're doing your dadas, they're doing their mamas, they're doing, some of them are doing that, which means the tongue is moving because it's developed. So it has a definite correlation to feeding and language are definitely correlated. At this time, munching is established, and munching is just the up and down movement. You put those wretched puffs, which I hate, on the baby's tongue, it melts, and they munch it up against their palate. There's no real lateral movement of the tongue, but it's allowing them to get it into a form that they can then swallow. There's more activation of the lower lip. They're not biting reflexively, and you're beginning to get what's called vertical chewing. And not a lot of kids have it at this age, but the components for that up and down movement. So vertical chewing is when you close your mouth, you take some food, you put it over between the molar surface and you chew, but then you can't quite do the rotary, so it flips back onto your tongue, and you close your mouth and you finish the activity with munching. So it's a combination of both. So it's not true chewing, but it's the beginnings of chewing. The planes of movement are now sagittal and frontal, so forward, backwards and forwards, with some up and down movements of the jaw and the tongue. You're starting with puree by 9 months. Lumpier foods can be handled. You're getting some mixed textured. You're getting fluid from an open cup and dry textures. So foods like watermelon, may be a problem because that's a true mixed texture. And so the child may or may not be handle it. And a lot of families will grind their food or fork mash it. So that was, sorry. There is something wrong with my computer. Okay, so now we're into 10 to 12 months. So you have gross motor, they're crawling, they're cruising. They're really working on all three planes of those movement. Again, with the fine motor, they're doing the same thing. Oral motor, they're able to bite through a soft cookie. They're handling chunkier tissues, and they've got a lot better oral control with fluids from a cup. So they're booming. So again, between 13 and 24 months, you've got some gross motor. Oh, geez, I've got only 5 minutes. You've got some gross motor, vision, and here they're all skill development. The oral motor and feeding is paired with expressive language as your gag is desensitized. You have more exploration of foods. You've got tongue movements, which are facilitated with eating and then expressed also with expressive language. The jaw is more stable to adjust to the size of foods. You can drink from a cup. Some kids can use a spoon or a fork. And your vertical chewing, which is that food goes in the mouth, tongue brings it over between the teeth, swallow, is more predominant. That you might see good clean bites to allow larger pieces of food, such as your meat. You're not seeing a shearing bite. You're seeing a bite. So a bite of an apple, a bite of a piece of meat, which then is given to the mouth to chew. So what you're seeing with vertical chewing is an open mouth. If you see a closed mouth, they're munching it and swallowing those little puppies whole. So they're swallowing their peas whole, they're swallowing their whatever you've given them whole. So we really do need to work on mouth open, good strength with a vertical chew. So again, feeding skill depends on what's offered. If the kid is kept in a crib until they're 2, you're not going to expect the typical motor development. By the same token, if a baby is bottle fed and given food purees until 2, feeding skill and development is also limited. I do not know how to stop this beeping. I'm sorry. So between 2 and 3 years, again, it's balance. All of your skill set is being refined. Everything is exploding. And this is when your oral motor, your tongue, your jaw movement refines, and it allows complex sounds and breath control with those sounds. You move from a vertical to a mature rotary chewing. And rotary chewing is when you chew gum. No, but none of us can chew gum with a vertical chew. We'd get really bored. We all rotary chew. So that's what that rotary chewing is all about. And that's when finally that plane of movement is complete in the mouth. So those planes of movements have taken a long time. You got it before 12 months with your gross motor, but you're obviously not going to be getting it until you're 3 or 4 with your oral motor. It takes, in order to do this rotary chewing, it takes a lot of stamina, it takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of motor planning. So again, if their mouth is closed, they're sucking and munching. So that's the takeaway. 3 planes of movement, mouth closed when you're chewing, or mouth open when you're chewing. So this is Ellie, who went through these slides with me, said I shouldn't put this in, but it's there just in case you want it. It basically shows the nutrients per kilo, depending on the age. I just like this because it gives me, if I go in and I see a 6-month-old who's not gaining weight, I know that they need at least 98 calories per kilo average to gain weight. And if they're getting 120, then something's wrong. They're not metabolizing, there's something going on. So it just gives me a bit of a reference point to talk to physicians and dietitians with. So then, Ellie said I should condense this. Water is really important. Subclinical dehydration contributes to GI issues such as reflux and constipation. And I Suzanne Evans Morris feels that reflux is a sign of inadequate water intake. There's all the other things that can go with it, like poor motility, poor mobility, but lack of water is water is needed for our digestion, and our formulas and our breast milk have a lot of water in them. So it's absorbed into the stomach. It helps mix up the food. It also helps to produce from the pancreas sodium bicarbonate, which helps to neutralize the acidic contents from the stomach as they go into the duodenum. And I've got a link in my references on GI. It's a Merck Manual GI review, and it's fabulous. It has lots of good pictures. So when there isn't enough water to produce this bicarbonate soda, what happens is the pyloric valve closes, because it's not going to allow the intestine to be exposed to acidic material. The pylorus closes. It facilitates the opening of the, I'm finished. It facilitates the opening of the lower esophageal sphincter, and it goes up the esophagus and you have reflux. So we really do need to make sure our kiddos are getting enough water. This is
Pat,
how
you still have about 5, 6,
Okay,
7,
I'm
10
ramming
minutes.
through this. Well, I gave myself 30.
Okay.
So our breast milk is, I'd say it's some of it can be up to 95% water, but there you do not need any water between 0 and 6 months. Between 6 and 9 months, you could introduce a little bit of cup drinking, a few ounces out of a cup in a day, just to get that oral motor practice, as well as to perhaps get their bodies exposed to more water. And then once they are on table food, they need water. And there's a lot of guesstimates out there, half of your body weight in water. Other people say if they've got a lot of formula on board, if they're still drinking a lot, they don't need much. But your kiddos after a year, should be on less bottles and maybe about 16 to 20 ounces of some kind of milk. So here's the guidelines. Rice cereal is a no-no. We heard that from the other group. Some pediatricians want you to give them a little pureed meat. Some of them want you to give them a little watered down soupy paste of peanut butter. I say talk to your pediatrician about what you should be feeding your baby. And I love avocado. I like it thinned down, perhaps mixed with a little banana. And then look at your commercial baby foods. They are they have ascorbic acid in them as a preservative. Some of the organic ones have rosemary in them. But I think I applaud families who offer their own baby food, and I certainly understand how difficult it is for others. So there's a daily, it's from the Merck Manual. I love the Merck Manual. And then finally, we have breathing. I see a lot of kiddos who, because of respiratory issues and structural issues, don't breathe through their noses. Babies are obligate nose breathers. This is what allows them that 1-1-1 suck, swallow, breathe, is that kiddo is breathing through his nose when he's breastfeeding. Babies with respiratory or structural issues have the inability to reproduce this smooth, typical eating pattern. So an open mouth has a lifelong implication. And this is a gross pic from the Breath Institute, which shows this poor woman with her her recessed jaw as a result of chronic sleep apnea, you name it, is often as a result of this. So when do you want to refer to your feeding specialist or your nutritionist with an infant? When the infant has poor latch to bottle or breast, they have poor endurance, they fall asleep with poor transfer, they only eat when they're asleep, they're coughing, choking, and turning blue with feedings. They once ate well, but they hit that 4-month piece where reflexive eating goes away. You get decreased volume, and then finally poor weight loss, poor weight gain, or weight loss. And if they're older, if they choke, gag, vomit on lumpy, bumpy, or solid foods, a lot of kids will pocket food because they can't swallow it, sucking on their food. So you put in a piece of beef and they're just sucking the juice out of it with a munch, and then they cannot tolerate the beef, obviously. Again, poor weight weight loss or poor weight gain. They're spitting out their solids. They have a preference for purees, soft, easy to manipulate foods, excessive liquid intake, and food refusal, and finally limited diet. And this is all age appropriate. So 8 months to 3 years you want to see. So here are my references, and they're extensive, and I'm done. There we go. 3 minutes to spare.
Pat, you were awesome. We're going to open it up to just some questions for a few minutes. So if anybody has Q&A, you can put those in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask those questions.
Well, I'll go ahead.
I have,
Okay.
oh, you go ahead.
Audrey,
Okay. I also hate puffs. Can you tell me why so I can verbalize to parents?
Okay, puffs were manufactured in order for babies, once they sit, to use their pincer grasp and put in. And it was actually Kay Toomey, I think, was the one that invented them. So, but I hate them because they don't have enough calories in them. I mean, there's like maybe half a calorie per puff. I mean, I haven't looked at the can for a long time. They are commercially produced. They are put on the tongue blade and they immediately melt. So they are deceiving. So you think you're getting a solid piece of food that you're going to have to munch, but instead you start the munching and then they dissolve. And they have terrified a lot of the kiddos that I see who have trouble with grading on their tongue what they can swallow. So it's an immediate fluid and it can be overwhelming. Plus, I think you can use graham crackers are so much better. Some of your Keebler, commercially available but cheaper products. That's why I hate them.
Okay. It's marketing. And that is the same with I think it's a lot of marketing. And then I think it's the same with these squirt pouches.
Oh yeah.
To me, are keeping our kids in the sucking and puree way longer than they should be.
Yeah, I hate sippy cups. I like a straw or an open cup, and it's ease. I don't remember. I remember throwing a bottle into my kids' baby pack, but I don't think I traveled with sippy cups or water bottles or any of that stuff. And I don't know. I think it's because we are on the go, and on the go means we need convenience. So and the woman your therapist that presented before also mentioned that she's not a fan of sippies. So straw or open.
Pat, I often see families, you're talking about water and food. I often see families feeding the kids just the food without a drink. Is that okay? Or what should I say, if anything? I always like a drink with my food.
Yeah. Who's this? Is this Nancy? I don't see
It's
you.
Deanna DeBella.
I think that is preference. I think the family wants the kid to get the food in before they offer them the drink. But I think a drink at any meal is an important way to really reinforce cup drinking. So yeah,
it's okay to just eat without a liquid.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it depends. I mean, It depends because your food has a fair bit. It depends on the food, but we all have water in everything we eat.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Deanna.
any other? Oh, somebody had a question. Sorry.
Where was Audrey again?
Okay.
I think this is a quick. I have a mom who's let's see. He just turned 2 in December. Anyway, he is still breastfeeding, and that's fine. It's fine with her, but she is interested in weaning. But she says he has started to bite, and it doesn't. And she does the regular things that we pull away and all that. But she says it almost seems like he can't breastfeed without biting. And I said there were lots of things that go on with our development of our body and our mouth muscles, and this guy is severely he seems to be functioning normally in most areas, but is severely speech delayed and can't seem to wrap his mouth around food. And I wondered if maybe he physically can't suck anymore.
Well, I think, when you look at, if you want to breastfeed until you're 20, go for it. I don't make any comments about that. That is a relationship between the baby and the mother. However, biting, is he trying to stabilize because the flow's too fast? I don't know. I mean, I would say, take a look at his mouth and see whether there's any restrictions, number one, and then just see how efficient he is with any kind of input. Does he have is his tongue, is his palate high? So there's all these other things that go into that. And speech delay, where are the speechies? Tongues, right? Don't you need your tongue to talk? All right, they're all nodding their head.
This is Nikki. I just want to chime in with Audrey's comment. As a mom who breastfed her children, I felt like whenever my son got a new tooth and we were breastfeeding 18 months about, I feel like it was kind of a reset, just kind of that, teething process, and whether he would bite, it was just kind of like, oh, yep. So just to keep that in mind, like as we're teething and all that, but yeah.
I have a question when it's my turn.
Yep, go right ahead. I was just going to call on you. We'll
Okay.
take this last question and then move on to our case presentation.
Okay. I would like if you could give a little bit of information about if you have a parent, if you have a mother that's breastfeeding and we're doing the bottle and we're doing an open mouth sippy cup and we have a pacifier, what does this look like? Is that too much at one time, or when do you stop one? I know there needs to be a transition period, but what does that look like as far as appropriate timing?
Oh boy, everybody's got their opinions on pacifiers. Everybody's got their opinions on breastfeeding, bottle feeding. It depends. Number one, it depends on the age of the child. So you have to coach it. You have to say, okay, what's the age of the kid? What's the developmental issue? And so why are all of these strategies being used? And I think is the open cup just a therapeutic, and the bottle and the breast is nutritive? I mean, the pacifier is to make, I still need to suck for whatever reasons. Am I that immature that I need this? So I think you have to, it's always the why. Why are all of these being used, rather than cut and dried? Never put your kid in a walker, never use a pacifier, never. I hate that thinking. I want to look at the why. I mean, why does this help? What can we do to fade it out? So I think you need to coach the kid before you do any of that, if that makes any sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and then Pat, there was one question in the chat, and it says, at what age does the child learn to close his mouth and maintain mature rotary chew?
Well, how many of you had parents that told you to close your mouth when you were chewing? My poor kids had well-meaning aunts and uncles who never had children who told them, you need to shut your mouth when you're chewing. And the feeding specialist says they can't. So by 4, that nice rotary chewing should be there, and they should gradually learn how to close their mouth. But, children need to have their mouth. They need that space in order to move the food around. And so I think it's very, very important that if we use behavioral feeding stuff and say, close your mouth when you're chewing, they're going to go back to munching. If that makes any sense.
Perfect. Okay, well, I am going to invite Rio and Chris to turn on their camera. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So you guys just tell me when to advance the slide. And can you guys see my slides? No. Let me try it one more time. Hey, thumbs up now. All right.
You're in presenter mode.
Oh, because it's probably on the wrong thing. How about now, Bailey?
Yep, now you're good.
Hey, so Chris and Rio.
Hi, so my name's Rio. I am the mom of Augie. He is 2.5. And this is Chris Sorensen. She's with DDI, our early intervention out here in Roosevelt. And she is our nurse that helps with Augie. So, he's saying and Augie's saying hi. So just a little background on Augie. He's 2.5. He was born May of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, but we didn't have any complications in pregnancy or anything. Delivery was fine. Everything was good for a minute. I'll get into that in just a second. But as he got a little bit older, he ended up having lots of delays, gross motor. He just recently started crawling. He doesn't talk, and we've had all sorts of issues with feeding. But through it all, he's always been happy, healthy, and no tantrums, no crying, really, just always a really pleasant baby. And you can see on the screen, he's number 6 of 6 kids. So we've done this all before. We've been here, done that. Should know what we're doing by now. Yeah, three brothers, 2 sisters. So he's the youngest, and everybody just adores Augie. So these are our primary areas of concern: is the gross motor, speech, and feeding. I'm gonna just kind of go through a little history that I wrote down, and it'll kind of hit on all of this. So let's see. So like I said, from the very beginning, he was always content and happy. He was really quiet. He very rarely cried. The only thing during pregnancy was that he just was not very active in the womb. There would be almost like days where I would have to like poke him because he wasn't moving, even when it got time, that they should be moving all the time. Other than that, though, we didn't have any sort of problems. So for the first 3 months of his life, he progressed normally. He held his head up. He liked tummy time. He was just a really good and easy baby, which was nice, him being the 6th baby. And at that time it was COVID. I was homeschooling kids. And so I needed him to be a good baby. And he was a really good baby. He started rolling at 4 to 5 months, and by 6 months he was rolling both ways. By 6 to 7 months he was sitting, and then by 8, with some support, but then by 8 months he was sitting all on his own. And that's kind of where he topped out on his gross motor skills. He just did not progress after that for a really long time. He could sit and he could roll to get where he needed, but he couldn't go from, he couldn't get himself into sitting. So if I sat him there, he'd sit there for however long I sat him. Or if I laid him down, he would roll all over. So by about a year, we were kind of getting worried that, okay, he's a good baby, but he's just not progressing. And so we talked to our doctor, and he's the one who suggested DDI and doing early intervention. So we kind of had that in the back of our minds, but it was summertime, just kind of kept it in the back of our minds. Anyway, we'll get back to this in a second too. So I'm going to talk about his feeding though. So from the very beginning, I breastfed him, and it was kind of a struggle from the beginning. He would breastfeed, he went right to me, he latched right on in the hospital, but it was never quite a good latch, and I couldn't ever get him to do it better. And so, I had nursed 5 other kids. I knew what I was doing, and it looked to me like he knew what he was doing, but we just could not get it to work well. It was painful for me, but he seemed to always be gaining weight, and like I said, he was always happy. So I just thought, it was my problem. It was my fault. I don't know what was wrong with me. It was just super painful for me. But I just kept going. I did actually call my doctor, but again, it was during COVID, and he suggested I call a nurse practitioner. I think she's did lactation too. So I did, and she wanted to do a virtual visit, and I wasn't super comfortable with that. So I was just like, no, I'll get it. We'll figure it out. He's gaining weight. It's fine. You know, I'll just keep going. So up until 6-7 months, he was just solely, well, even longer. I just solely breastfed him. I tried some puree, baby food, anything around 6-7 months, and he just would not take it. He'd just gag and choke and spit everything up, and he just could not handle it. So I tried new foods constantly with him, once a week, every few days, everything. Didn't matter what it was, what consistency, what texture, he just would gag and then choke and then throw up. So even at this time, he was still nursing every 2 to 3 hours, even at night, because he was so hungry. He wasn't getting any other source of food other than breast milk. And he obviously wasn't getting, he was getting enough to gain weight, but he wasn't getting enough to keep him satisfied. So I was up with him 4 or 5 times a night consistently, even 10, 11, 12 months old. At about 11 to 12 months, he did start taking some baby food, some applesauce, just very small bits of it though. And I was trying different bottles, different sippies. I mean, we went through like so many 10, 12, 15 different bottles, sippies, anything just to get him to take milk or water or anything. And he never would take pacifier, just couldn't, like wouldn't or couldn't do it. I ended up being able to finally find a bottle or a sippy that he could just chew on that would just kind of pour the milk into his mouth. And that's still kind of what he does today, is he just chews on a top and the milk or the juice or the water just goes in his mouth. I breastfed him for 15 months. It never got any easier. And by then it was finally like a relief, which I hated feeling that way because I loved breastfeeding. All my kids loved it. That was the best part of babies to me. But I did not enjoy it at all with Augie from the get-go. So it became clear between 12 months and 15 months that he had some serious delays and some serious issues going on, and we needed some help getting them addressed and getting our needs met. And so within a 2-week period, when he was about 15 months, I quit nursing him. We got into DDI, we contacted them and got into their program. And then on that same 2-week period, Augie ended up breaking his femur. By a fluke accident thing with our dog. He broke his femur just an inch under his hip. And so he ended up in a spica cast for 6 weeks, which means he couldn't roll, he couldn't crawl, all he could do was lay there, or I'd have to like prop him up in front of me and play with him. So, let's see. Once that cast was off, so he was in it for 6 weeks. Once that was off, we immediately started with DDI. And we started with Chris. She came once a month, and then we had a physical therapist come once a month. And we just started working with him and getting his body moving again, because by the time he got his cast off, he could roll still, but he had to relearn how to sit up on his own because he was so used to having the cast on his body that he'd just lay back and not be able to, he didn't have any core strength at all. So that started our journey with DDI and early intervention. And so for the first year, we worked on basic skills, like feeding himself, just saying sounds, because even up to that point, he wasn't hardly even saying any sounds. We worked on gaining strength in his arms, in his legs, in his core. He always had pretty good head strength, but everywhere else in his body was just really weak. So let's see. It took a long time for him to be able to get in and out of sitting position. And then after we got him to be able to go from like rolling on the ground to sitting, then we worked on from sitting to hands and knees. And then from there, we worked on going back and forth that way. And then finally, he didn't start crawling until he was 2.5. It was the month of that he turned 2.5. So last November, he finally started crawling on all fours. For the month before that, he kind of army crawled, but then he finally got it. And now he's to the point where he's crawling on all fours. We also worked on speech. So he would only just make a few like moaning, groaning, sounds. So we've had to work on vowel sounds, we've had to work on consonant sounds, and we're getting there, getting closer. And then we've also had to work on his feeding, because like I said, he was solely breastfed for the most part for till a year, and then quit that at 15 months. But he just wanted to have pureed foods, applesauce, those kind of things. Anything else he'd just choke on or gag on. We worked on adding texture to his diet with DDI. We worked on having him feed himself using the pincer grasp. And that took a long time, but he finally got that probably almost not quite 6 months ago. So it took almost a year to be able to get that and feed himself. Now he's pretty much eating everything as long as it's small enough. We were just talking because he was eating a fruit snack earlier, and Pat was like, "Oh, is that new?" And it is new. He hadn't been able to do like gummy things. And so he just this month started being able to eat a fruit snack. And so it's just kind of something new every day that he's learning, but he can now eat like chicken, rice, noodles, as long as they're little. They still have to be, and he can eat, it either has to be him picking it up to feed himself, or I have to feed him on the spoon. Because if he does it by himself with a spoon, he just gets too much, like it's a whole thing, and then we choke and everything. Yeah. Okay. So she was just saying, it turns out that Augie had a tongue tie and a lip tie, and we didn't know about it until we met with Pat the first time. She came to our house as a feeding specialist with Chris, and she immediately saw that he had these this tongue tie and lip tie. And she was like, "How are you able to breastfeed for 15 months with this baby? Like, it shouldn't have even been able to happen." And yeah, that was when he was close to 2.5, when we finally figured that out. And so she suggested that we go get his tongue clipped. So we went to the local dentist and had that done. And it was like immediate results with him, and miraculous results, I feel like. I wrote down some of them, but as soon as we had that done, he was able to start eating more solid foods with zero gagging. So like the fruit snack, there was no way he would have been able to do that until we had the tongue tie or the tongue clipped. And I mean, even mashed potatoes, anything like that, you couldn't move his tongue even past his teeth. And so to like move food around with his tongue, he wasn't able to do that until we had it clipped. He rarely spits up or throws up anymore. Like if he does, it's very rare, but before it was just constant. It was all day, every day. he stunk. The car seat stunk, his clothes stunk, everything just stunk because he was constantly gagging, reflux, just all over everything. Anytime he'd eat, anytime he'd move, he would just spit up or throw up. And then since having his tongue clipped, he's been able to make tons more sounds. So we were working really hard with DDI to try to get him to do sounds, and he was making some progress, but not much. And he still doesn't have any words. He still actually doesn't say any sort of words. But here, we can let you see him more. He is starting to make all the consonant sounds, ah, e, oo, all sorts of things. And then we're getting more, or those are vowels, and then we're getting more consonants like baba, gaga, like he can do the gaga. And let's see what else. Da. So you have to use everything, you have to use your tongue, and he's finally starting to be able to do that. We are still working. The only thing we're still working on, working really hard at, is getting him to drink from a cup and closing his mouth, or a straw, or sippy, anything really. Just him being able to close his mouth and suck, or like be able to drink from. And I think most of that, I feel like he's just developed bad habits from, because he's 2.5, almost 3. Like, this is just his habits and how he eats and how he drinks. And so it's just kind of going to be a process to get him to be able to suck from a straw or those kind of things. But I do feel like with the time being clipped, it's made a world of a difference in so many different areas. And yes, he has been able to, he's just recently learned how to drink from a cup without just dumping it. And he still kind of has his mouth like open, but he's getting it, and he's being able to swallow as he's pouring it. So I think all these things, we're making progress, but we still have a lot of progress to go.
Anyone have any questions?
So these are the questions you want us to answer, right? To talk about.
Yeah, those are
Okay.
just some of the thoughts in my mind about what could be, maybe get some support from you guys.
Okay, so what we are going to do today, group, is each of you guys will be going into a breakout session with one topic. So if you are in Rebecca or Kurt's breakout, you guys will be talking about some family supports or strategies. If you are in the group with Heather and Kate, you'll be trying to identify some outside resources. If you are in the group with Shelby, you'll be talking about some ideas on how to get him to communicate. And then if you're in the breakout session with Crystal and Pat, we'll be talking about some oral stimulation. And we are going to be rotating Rio and Chris in between the breakout groups. So we'll pop in there and give you guys a warning and move them to the next one, so that if you have some follow-up questions, you'll be able to ask them directly. So, all right. So remember to turn your cameras on, take a minute to do introductions. I just want to thank Rio again for sharing that. I know it's not always an easy thing to get on in front of a group and share your story. So I really appreciate that. It's a great thing to hear it from a family's perspective on it. So we're going to go ahead and open those breakout groups and go from there.